Hello. In the last video of the Scratch project, we got a UFO with a little bit of animation to it going. Yeah, we just really made the image in the animation, and in this video we're going to get it moving. So I've worked ahead a little bit, and what I've done is in an offline version, I've worked out some of the math, some of the random math to just have a good idea for what I'm doing. So this is the unit that should be hidden to begin with, and I just have them here so it can indicate that something got spawned. So every time something spawned, it says hello. This is more or less what I'm looking for. Right now there's no wrapping, so one just went off the screen and it's going to get stuck on an edge, and everything's getting stuck on edges right now. So far with my random, it kind of appears that there's a higher frequency of things coming from this side than this side, and I don't know, maybe the random is a little less inclined to pick a 0 because it's being determined by a random 1 or 0. So I'm not really sure on that. That might be an issue with the randomness, but I do seem to be getting more coming from one direction than the other. And that's the only place that I could track it down, is the use of 1 and 0 to determine certain parts about direction. So what I'm aiming for is getting them coming only at certain angles, because I don't want them to, they're all going to come off of the X edge, and I don't want them coming on angles that they're going to be doing quite what this asteroid is doing, for example. So I've tried to make them so they have a more limited angle range. So this one can't go in an angle such as this, so that it lingers on the screen for that long. And yeah, we have them coming up at angles, going down at angles, but those angles are pretty limited. And then there is the issue that it seems as though significantly less are coming from this side, and I'm not exactly sure why that is. That may just it may relate to using 0 to determine that. I'm not really sure though. Or it may just be that the random isn't quite as random as I'd like for it to be, because they do come from this side. But particularly at the start, it seems as though more are coming from this side. And random can be pretty strange in computer programs, so I'm not sure how random the random in Scratch actually is, because random numbers are not something that computers are very good at. So that's what we got going on, and I've just worked ahead to work out initializing the UFO to these different randoms, where I mean I'm using 0s and 1s. These are to determine certain aspects of direction and to help to be able to constrain the angles in the way I want them constrained. I don't want things to be able to come on really harsh angles and go like this across the board 10 degrees at a time kind of thing. So I've limited the angles. The angle is actually limited to 15 degrees in 4 directions, and a lot of that's being determined by 0, 1, so more or less a coin toss random number, so a 0 or a 1. So yeah, we'll rebuild this in the online version to get it working and try to get to a point that we have wrapping also working, because this one is not wrapping, and the UFOs should destroy if a UFO starts on this side, It should destroy itself when it gets to this side, and the opposite is also true. So to get it wrapping, we have to do what we did for the rock and give it something like this, a really big circle. So we'll do that. We'll just duplicate the last frame. We'll change its name to big. And we'll just draw a big circle around it. So we'll just give it a big gigantic circle, holding the shift key to get a good perfect circle. And we'll make it good and big. It's never seen, so it's just the issue that it's able to do what we want it to do. So we have a lot of layers to bounce around there. So that should get us going. Alright, so we'll just put this aside and let's go to events. So when clicked, I don't know if we need it to do anything more than hide. So we're just going to put those together kind of in the same fashion I have it here, where it's not hiding yet. Then when it receives the signal start, so when I receive the signal start, which all of them receive from here, when clicked it broadcasts start. So that's more or less how everything starts here. Let's reset the rock back to where it was, so that's not distracting us. So when I receive the signal start, it will go into a forever loop. We'll leave it at, we'll give it a short wait time. So let's make it every 5 seconds we'll spawn a clone. We'll do the same thing with this too. So let's change the costume so it's not so distracting, and we'll just get it to say hello, and that's just a temporary thing. So it'll say hello for 2 seconds and generate a clone. So let's see, create clone of myself. The wait in between spawning UFOs, that would eventually become a variable, so that we can change the duration of time. So at the beginning, at an early level, it would generate less, and then as the levels went up, it would generate more. So this would be another place that would have a variable. So now we would be looking at when I start as a clone. So let's have a look at my project to see how I work that. So when it starts as a clone, the first thing I have it doing is going to another block to initialize itself. So that's init UFO. So we'll create that. Make a block, run without screen refresh, and we'll just call it INIT UFO for initialize UFO. That's just a common shorthand for initialize. So the first thing it would do is initialize the UFO. So we're going to need some variables. Let's go to our variables. So this one doesn't have any. Let's glance at what we have here. We have for move angle, position X, speed, and UFO direction. So what UFO direction means is it going to be coming from this edge or this edge? And move angle is the angle that it's going to move along. And position X, it's just easier to have it as a variable to be able to determine which side it's going to be on. So let's start making those. We'll go with Move angle. Okay. UFO direction. And I put UFO there because direction is already a variable. So we want that to be distinct from the direction it's pointing because we want it to stay at this orientation. So we create a UFO direction when we don't want to use the direction it's facing for the direction it moves in. We need one for speed for this sprite only, and all of these variables should say UFO, this, which means it's only for the UFO. So we have move angle, speed, UFO direction, and then we'll go position X. So we don't want all of these showing. It's going to be of no benefit. So let's have a glance at this. So we're going to use a random number for speed. So when we set the speed, it's one of the first things. We'll go set speed to a random number. And let's see what I used there. I used 0.75 to 2.5. I used decimal points quite on purpose. As I understand how random will work is if we put an integer value in here, it will only make random integers. And to get it to do floating point numbers with decimal points, we have to include a decimal point to tell it that. So that would be the behavior of a dynamic computer language, where it's going to determine if that should be an integer whole number or a float number with fractions. So we'll do the same thing here, 0.75 to 2.50, and I'm just going to put the same number of decimals there and assume that it's probably going to generate the number according to that, but I'm not really sure. I would have to observe what it does to be certain as to how it behaves. So the next we're going to do UFO direction, and this is a 0 or 1 number. Yeah, I'm just going to stick with the 0 or 1 number, even though I do have some wondering on that. So we'll set UFO direction to 0 or 1. So we'll pick one of those two, hopefully. And I'm pretty sure if we do this, well, I don't want to mess around that way. But my previous experiments indicated that this should generate always either a 0 or a 1, a whole number, without putting a decimal point there. So the first thing I do is I set position X to minus 260. So position X will start back here. And that may be different. Let's have a look at what it looks like with our UFO in this version, because the sizes are different between the two different projects. So we'll just take them like this. We'll get them on the edge, and we want to see right about there. So that's around minus 270, probably makes more sense for this one. So we'll go code set position X to minus 270. So the UFO direction is going to determine, should it stay on this edge or should it not stay on this edge? So we'll use an if. So if it's on a minus 270, that means its move direction will be in a positive direction. So we have UFO direction of either 0 or 1. So 1 would be it should stay in the same position and move in the positive direction. So we would be looking at if UFO direction is equal to 0, we want to change position X to a positive 270, so it's on this side, and change the UFO direction from 0 to minus 1. So we would go set UFO direction to minus 1. And set position X to position X times UFO direction. So we can do it like that to avoid using too many magic numbers. So we know that we just set UFO direction to minus 1, so we can type minus 1 in there, it's all the same, but okay, so that should get us going in the right direction. Let's see what I had next there. So we have a speed, we have a direction, we have a position. I would imagine the next thing we're looking for is our move angle. So after we've done that, we want to set the move angle, and I went with 60 to 75 degrees, and we'll explain that over in the online version. So we want to set move angle to a random number. Here, let's pick this one. Between 60 and 75 degrees. And that's a really narrow thing, right? That's a narrow degrees. So what that is going to do is that's going to limit it to not having those really hard angles, so that the UFO doesn't end up doing this kind of a wrap around the screen. So it's going to come on softer angles mostly, because it's always going to come off of the X, so it's going to come on soft angles kind of like this rather than on hard angles like this. That's what we're aiming to do. So if we looked at that here, we're basically going 60 to 75. So it's a really small seeming angle. So what we're going to do from there is we're going to make that apply to, we're going to make it so that it opens up. So we want it to be going either between 60 and 75 like this, or between 105 and 120, is it? Yeah, 105 and 120. So it's going to do one of these. So how we do that is again using pick random. So that would just happen inside of an if. So we'll go if pick random 0 to 1 equals 0. And it will change the move angle. So it will take the number between 60 and 75 and subtract it from 180. So if we looked at that, and maybe I should have just put one of these up here so it's easier to do. So let's say it picked 60, it will go 180 minus the 60. So it would 180 minus 60 would end at the 120. Whereas if it was the 75, it would end up at 105. So hopefully that makes sense. So we go control if random number is equal to 0, set move angle. We'll just duplicate it here. Scrap that. To move angle minus 180 minus move angle. So 180 minus move angle. So yeah, that will make it so that it's either going between 60 and 75 or 105 to 120 degrees. So it has 15 degrees of choices in 2 directions. And then we want to look at our UFO direction because, well, yeah, we do have to adjust that for the UFO direction also, because that angle is used to calculate the direction it moves in. So if it's moving in a negative, this angle has to reflect that. So how that looks is looking at UFO direction. So if UFO direction equals -1, that means it's traveling from this side, and that angle needs to be reversed. So the move angle would need to be reversed. So that's another if statement. Oops. That's what happens when you pull on too much of an angle downwards, it scrolls. So if I go like this when I'm trying to lift it. So let's see if UFO direction is equal to -1. And we have that up here, so we'll just duplicate that from here. So if UFO direction is equal to -1, then we'll set UFO direction, or move angle I should say, to 0 minus move angle. And that will move it from into the negative direction. Cursor doesn't work the same in the online version. So that should get everything going. And then the next thing, we actually have to position the UFO and then make it show. So we use position X, which was already determined, and then a random number on Y between -65 and 165 to 165. Now that number, let's see how that looks. So up there, whoops, that was not the greatest place to move that. Should have moved it down here. So we could also look at that like this. So that could be Y160 to minus Y160 because it doesn't need to be in a wrap range there. So that'll look different on the online one though. So that's where I should be doing this. So somewhere around here as being the top and bottom is 165 on this one. So we'll go motion, go to XY. We'll duplicate this. For Y, we want either from minus 165, whoops, minus 165 to 165. And then our other one is position X. And let's just make sure I did. This correctly, because this should not be that. This should be position X. So this is where we flip position X, and I accidentally had move angle here. So apologies for that. We'll want to pay close attention to that mistake. There we go. So that'll pop him into his random position. We don't want that to happen to him though. He's just the only person there, I guess, that it could happen to, so it happened to him. Or I just created a clone, I'm not really sure. Not really sure which on that. Because we don't have hide in play yet. And then we would tell it to show. So that basically gets everything in place for initializing it at random positions and giving it the ability to move. So now we're going to make a block run without screen fresh for move. And this, I should capitalize that like that. So now we have a move block that will get him moving, and we'll still leave this so it doesn't hide, and let's change our costume, and let's make that one of the first things we do in our loop here. So before we create a clone, we should switch the costume. So we should ensure that we're starting at a right costume. So let's see, what were we doing? So we want to plunk in the move. In here, we're going to broadcast a signal. So we will broadcast signal, and we'll create a new signal called animate. So we'll go new message, and we'll just call it animate, and it will start the animation running. So then we have when I receive animate, it would go into a forever loop. Now, what we want to check here is we're going to need a check because we have the big costume. So we're going to go if our costume number is equal to 4, if our costume number is equal to 4, and this should probably be an if else, so let's get an if else. If our costume number is equal to 4, go to costume number 1, so switch costume to UFO 1, and that will make it skip past the big costume, else next costume, and we'll put in the time delay here still, so we'll leave that time delay in. So I think that is what I have here, same deal. So now it's really just getting things moving, so that would be change X by and change Y by. We'll need operators, sine and cosine, and multiplied. So we want the speed times sine of move angle, not direction, move angle. So usually we would have the word direction in here, but we use direction to determine if it's going in a positive or negative direction. So move angle is more appropriate in here now. So that's for X. For Y, it would be cosine. So that'll get us moving. And we don't have any detection, and we're not going to get to detecting anything in this one. What we're going to do is we're going to come over here and let's see, where did we put wrapping? So here's our wrapping on our asteroid. So we're going to take these off. We're going to drop this into UFO, and let's see, we don't have any variables that are going to matter there. So we'll drop that in UFO and we'll put this back together, and then we'll fix move. So let's go back to the UFO. Now we have just the general wrapping here, and we need to fix move. So in move, we're going to need a variable, make a variable for this sprite only, costume number, and let's do that right. So if we remember what we did there, we went set costume number, to costume number, switch costume to big, move, check for the wrapping, switch costume to costume number. Let's turn that off. Okay, let's just glance in the rock. That all looks correct. The UFO numbers might be a little bit different, so we can check that if we want. So he's off the screen at around 180. Let's check on this side. I'm not sure how centered he is, because he's not because I didn't center it properly. We actually have a variance here. So we have minus 190 on one side and minus 180 on the other side. Now, I guess the only way we could fix that is to go back and recenter the UFO. But actually, let's not worry about that. We'll go with the 190. And then it'll just be off the top a little bit longer than off the bottom. But recentering the UFO so that those numbers are even might be the way to go too. So let's see, where was that? ABS 270 on the edge is right. And let's just go 190 here. So that should get us wrapping. So for now we're leaving our default one visible so he can announce that something's supposed to be coming out. We'll run this and we'll keep our fingers crossed to see that everything's working right. So there's a UFO coming out. Let's see if he wraps. So we wrapped okay. We got one coming out the other side. So those look like they're working okay. The rate that the UFOs are coming out is obviously too high right now. But it's up that high so that we can get an idea that they're moving in the different angles and at different speeds. So we have different angles and different speeds going on. This all looks like it's functioning good. So that's pretty much it for this video. We'll plot the hide in there. So with the wrapping working like that, I guess the thing to do now is to look at the X position. So when we get to an X position, let's see our start, let's just make sure of our start position. So our start position is minus 270. So let's actually change our start position to minus 269. No, if it's greater than 270, that'll work. This will work the way that it is. Instead of flipping the X position, what we want to do here is delete this clone. Because we don't want it to wrap around X, we want it to delete when it hits that level. So now when it gets to 271 or whatever's above 270 according to the speed, it will delete, and should do it in both directions. So that would be the last thing to test out. Let's just see if that's working. So naturally the first UFO is coming through at a slow speed. And it should delete. There's no reason that it wouldn't. So that looks like it's working. That's kind of what I was looking for. So that's it for this video. In the next video we'll come back and we'll deal with some of the collisions and shooting things, like the UFOs, get them shooting randomly also, and deal with some collisions. So until then, I hope this was helpful, and take care.